Maya Johnson turned the steering wheel carefully as she drove down Oakwood Avenue. The 17-year-old girl had just finished basketball practice at her high school. Her muscles ached from running drills for 2 hours, but she felt good. The team was preparing for the state championships, and Coach Williams said Maya had a real shot at a college scholarship. The evening sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Maya hummed along to the music playing softly on the radio. She was thinking about her homework and whether she should study for her chemistry test tonight or tomorrow morning. She stopped completely at the stop sign on the corner, looked both ways, then continued driving toward her house. That's when she saw the flashing red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. Maya's heart began to beat faster. She had never been pulled over before. She was a good driver, always careful to follow every rule. She couldn't think of anything she had done wrong. Maybe the officer needed to pass her for an emergency. She pulled over to the side of the road, put her car in park, and turned off the engine. Her hands were shaking slightly. She remembered what her father had told her many times. Keep your hands on the steering wheel where the officer can see them. Be polite, don't make sudden movements. Her father, Marcus Johnson, was a lawyer who worked on civil rights cases. He had given Maya these instructions several times, and she always thought he was being too worried. Now sitting in her car with a police car behind her, she understood why he had been so serious. A police officer walked up to her window. He was a white man in his 40s with short gray hair and cold blue eyes. His name tag read Mitchell. Maya rolled down her window and tried to smile even though she felt nervous. "Good evening, officer," Maya said politely. "Is there a problem?" Officer Mitchell looked at her with a hard expression. "License and registration," he said without greeting her back. Maya kept her movements slow and careful. "My license is in my purse on the passenger seat and my registration is in the glove box. I'm going to get them now." She had learned to announce her actions so the officer wouldn't be startled. She handed him her license and registration. Officer Mitchell looked at them for a long time. His eyes moved from the documents to Maya's face, then back again. He seemed surprised by something. "This your car?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Maya replied. "Well, it's my parents' car, but I drive it to school and practice." "Where do you live?" Mitchell asked, even though her address was right there on her license. Maya felt confused. "The address is on my license. Cedar Hills Drive." Mitchell's jaw tightened. Cedar Hills Drive was in one of the nicest neighborhoods in town. The houses there were expensive and most families who lived there were wealthy. Maya's mother was a doctor, and her father was a successful lawyer. They had worked hard to give Maya a good life. "Where are you coming from?" the officer demanded. "Basketball practice at Lincoln High School. I'm on the varsity team. Where are you really going?" Mitchell's voice had an edge to it now. Maya felt her confusion growing. "I'm going home, sir." "Is something wrong?" "Did I do something?" "You ran that stop sign back there," Mitchell said. Maya's eyes widened. "No, sir, I didn't. I stopped completely. I always do." "Don't argue with me," Mitchell snapped. "Step out of the vehicle." "But why?" Maya asked. Her father had also told her that officers needed a reason to ask her to get out of the car during a routine traffic stop. Mitchell's hand moved to rest on his gun. "I said get out of the car now." Fear shot through Maya's body like electricity. Her mouth went dry. She opened the door slowly and stepped out, her legs feeling weak. She stood by her car with her hands slightly raised, trying to show she wasn't a threat. "I'm going to search your vehicle," Mitchell announced. "Do you have a reason to search it?" Maya asked, her voice shaking. "I haven't done anything wrong." "I smell marijuana," Mitchell said flatly. Maya's eyes went wide with shock. "What? No. I don't smoke anything. I'm an athlete. I've never even tried drugs." Mitchell ignored her protests and began searching her car. He pulled things out roughly, tossing her backpack onto the street. Her textbooks fell out, along with her water bottle and gym clothes. He dumped out her basketball bag. He opened her glove box and threw papers everywhere. Maya watched in horror as her belongings scattered across the ground. By now, a few people had stopped to watch. Maya could see them standing on the sidewalk, some holding up their phones. She felt embarrassed and scared. What were they thinking? What would they tell people about what they saw? Mitchell found a small metal tin in her car. It was just an empty mint container that Maya used to hold hair ties. He held it up like it was evidence of a crime. "What's this?" he demanded. "It's a mint tin. I keep hair elastics in it for after practice," Maya explained. "We'll see about that," Mitchell said. He put the tin in a plastic bag. Maya's phone rang in her pocket. Without thinking, her hand moved toward her pocket to silence it. It was an automatic reaction, something anyone would do. But Officer Mitchell grabbed her arm roughly and spun her around, slamming her against the car. Pain shot through Maya's shoulder and cheek as her face pressed against the metal. She cried out in surprise and fear. "Don't move," Mitchell shouted. Before Maya could explain, she felt cold metal on her wrists. He was handcuffing her. The cuffs were so tight they hurt. Maya's breathing became fast and panicked. "What did I do?" she cried out. "Please, I didn't do anything." "You're under arrest for resisting arrest and possession of drug paraphernalia," Mitchell said coldly. "I wasn't resisting." "My phone rang. I was just—" "Save it," Mitchell interrupted. He pulled her away from the car and walked her toward his police vehicle. Maya's mind was racing. This couldn't be happening. She was a good student, a good person. She followed the rules. She had never been in trouble in her entire life. How was this possible? The people watching were talking among themselves now. Some were still recording on their phones. Maya felt tears running down her face. She was embarrassed, terrified, and confused. She couldn't understand what she had done to deserve this treatment. As Mitchell opened the back door of his police car, Maya heard him mutter something under his breath. "You people always think you're above the law." Those words hit Maya like a punch. You people. She knew exactly what he meant. It wasn't about the stop sign. It wasn't about marijuana. It was about the color of her skin. Officer Mitchell had seen a young black girl driving a nice car in a wealthy neighborhood, and he had decided she didn't belong there. Maya sat in the back of the police car, her hands cuffed behind her, unable to wipe away her tears. She thought about her parents and how worried they would be. She thought about her friends and what they would say when they heard. She thought about her basketball scholarship and whether this would ruin everything she had worked for. Most of all, she thought about her father's warnings. He had prepared her for this moment, hoping it would never come. But it had. And now Maya understood that being polite and following the rules wasn't always enough to protect you. Sometimes the people who were supposed to protect you were the ones you needed protection from. The police station was cold and bright. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Officer Mitchell led Maya inside, still handcuffed. Other officers looked up from their desks, their eyes following her as she walked past. Maya kept her head down, feeling their stares burning into her. At the booking desk, a heavy-set officer with a thick mustache looked at her with bored eyes. Mitchell handed him some papers. "Got another one," Mitchell said casually, like Maya was just another piece of work to process before his shift ended. The desk officer read the papers and raised his eyebrows. "Cedar Hills Drive?" "Nice neighborhood," Mitchell smirked. "Yeah, found drug paraphernalia in her vehicle. She resisted when I tried to search, and that's not true." Maya's voice came out louder than she intended. "I didn't resist anything. My phone rang and I reached for my pocket. That's all I did." "That's what they all say," the desk officer replied without looking at her. Maya felt helpless. No one was listening to her. No one cared about her side of the story. She was fingerprinted, her fingers pressed hard against the ink pad and then onto cards. They took her photo, front and side view, like she was a criminal. They took her phone, her jewelry, even her hair ties. Everything went into a plastic bag. Then they put her in a cell. Maya had never been in a cell before. It was small, with concrete walls painted a dirty beige color. There was a metal bench attached to the wall and a toilet in the corner with no privacy. The door clanged shut behind her with a loud final sound that made her jump. She sat on the bench and hugged herself. The cell smelled like cleaning chemicals and something else she couldn't identify. Her shoulder still hurt from being slammed against the car. The handcuffs had left red marks on her wrists. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the fear and confusion swirling in her mind. How long would they keep her here? Would they really charge her with crimes she didn't commit? What would happen to her future? Maya didn't know what time it was, but it felt like hours passed. She could hear voices and footsteps in the hallway outside, but no one came to talk to her or explain what would happen next. She felt invisible, like she didn't matter at all. Finally, she heard familiar voices, her mother's voice high and upset, her father's voice deeper and controlled but with an edge of anger underneath. Relief flooded through Maya, followed immediately by shame. She didn't want her parents to see her like this, locked in a cell like a criminal. A guard opened the door. "You're free to go. Your parents are here." Maya stood up on shaky legs and followed the guard down the hallway. When she saw her parents, she couldn't hold back anymore. She ran to her mother, and Dr. Sarah Johnson wrapped her arms around her daughter, both of them crying. "Baby, are you okay? Did they hurt you?" Sarah's hands moved over Maya, checking for injuries like the doctor she was. "I'm okay, Mom," Maya whispered, even though she wasn't okay at all. Marcus Johnson stood nearby, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. He was a tall man with graying hair at his temples, usually quick to smile. But tonight his jaw was clenched so tight the muscles stood out. His eyes were hard as stone. A sergeant approached them with papers. "She's been charged with reckless driving, resisting arrest, and possession of drug paraphernalia. Her court date is—" "I want to see the body camera footage," Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through the sergeant's words like a knife. "Right now." The sergeant shifted uncomfortably. "Well, Mr. Johnson, there's been a technical issue. Officer Mitchell's body camera wasn't functioning during the stop." Marcus stared at him. "And the dash camera in his vehicle? Also malfunctioning. These things happen sometimes. Equipment breaks down." "How convenient," Marcus said softly, but his voice carried a dangerous tone. "I want a copy of the incident report, all documentation related to this arrest, and maintenance records for Officer Mitchell's equipment." "We'll get those to your attorney within the standard time frame," the sergeant replied. "I am her attorney," Marcus said, "and I want them now." The sergeant looked like he wanted to argue but thought better of it. "I'll see what I can do." Marcus signed the papers to take Maya home. As they walked out to the parking lot, none of them spoke. Sarah kept her arm around Maya's shoulders. Marcus walked slightly ahead, his hands clenched into fists. When they got to the car, Marcus finally spoke. "Tell me everything. Every single detail from the moment you saw his lights." As they drove home, Maya told them the whole story. She told them how she had stopped at the sign, how Mitchell had asked strange questions, how he claimed to smell marijuana that didn't exist. She told them about the rough search, the empty mint tin, and how reaching for her ringing phone had somehow become resisting arrest. Sarah cried quietly as she listened. Marcus's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. "Did he say anything else?" Marcus asked. "Anything at all?" Maya hesitated, then whispered. "He said, 'You people always think you're above the law.'" The car was silent for a moment. Then Marcus nodded slowly, like this confirmed something he had already suspected. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay in her comfortable bed in her safe house, but she felt different. Something had changed inside her. She kept seeing Officer Mitchell's cold eyes and hearing his voice. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the metal of the handcuffs on her wrists and the slam of her body against the car. The next morning, Maya didn't want to go to school. She felt like everyone would know what happened, that they would look at her differently. But her mother convinced her that hiding would only make it worse. At school, Maya discovered her mother was right, but not in a good way. People did know what happened. Some students she thought were her friends avoided her in the hallways. Others whispered and stared. A few people asked if she was okay, but many just assumed the charges were true. "I heard she had drugs in her car," Maya overheard one girl saying at the next lunch table. "She seems so nice, though," another girl replied. "But you never really know people, I guess." Maya felt sick. She left her lunch untouched and went to the bathroom, locking herself in a stall until the period ended. Her coach pulled her aside after practice. "Maya, I heard about your arrest. You know we have a zero-tolerance policy for drugs on this team." "Coach Williams, I didn't have drugs. I don't do drugs." "You know me," Maya pleaded. The coach looked uncomfortable. "I want to believe you, Maya. But until this is sorted out, I have to suspend you from the team. It's policy." Maya felt like the ground was falling away beneath her feet. Basketball was everything to her. The team was her family. And now that was being taken away too. When she got home, she found her father in his home office, surrounded by papers and his laptop open. He had that look on his face that meant he was working on an important case. "What are you doing?" Maya asked from the doorway. Marcus looked up at her. "I'm researching Officer Derek Mitchell, and what I'm finding isn't good." He turned his laptop screen toward her. There were news articles, court documents, and official complaints. Marcus had been digging all day and night. "Mitchell has been a police officer for 6 years, Marcus explained. In that time, he's had 7 complaints filed against him for racial profiling. All of them were dismissed or marked as unsubstantiated. He's had 3 excessive force complaints, 2 of those involving black teenagers." He was moved from one precinct to another twice, but he was never disciplined or fired. Maya sat down heavily in a chair. So he's done this before? Many times, it looks like. The department just keeps protecting him. Marcus's voice was tight with anger. But they made a mistake this time. They targeted my daughter, and I'm not going to let this go. Sarah came into the office, worry etched on her face. Marcus, the local news, just ran a story about Maya's arrest. They're calling it a routine traffic stop with complications. They interviewed Officer Mitchell, and he's saying Maya was aggressive and uncooperative. Maya felt tears burning in her eyes again. But that's a lie. I did everything right. I know, baby, Marcus said. He stood up and hugged his daughter. I know you did, and we're going to prove it. This isn't just about defending you anymore. This is about stopping Mitchell from doing this to anyone else. This is about making sure the police department can't protect racist cops anymore. Maya looked at her father. She saw the determination in his eyes, the same determination he brought to all his civil rights cases. But this time it was personal. This time it was his own daughter who had been hurt. What do we do? Maya asked quietly. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a lawyer who had just found his case. We fight. We expose everything. We make them answer for what they've done. And we make sure they never forget the name Maya Johnson. Marcus Johnson's law office became a war room. His partners and associates brought in boxes of files, legal books, and laptops. Everyone knew this case was different. This wasn't just another client. This was Marcus's daughter, and they all wanted to help. Marcus filed motion after motion with the court. He demanded all records from Maya's arrest. He wanted Officer Mitchell's personnel file. He wanted the maintenance logs for the police cameras that supposedly weren't working. He wanted dash cam footage, radio communications, and witness statements. The prosecutor's office fought him on everything. These records are protected by privacy laws, the assistant district attorney argued in court. Officer Mitchell's personnel file is confidential, Your Honor, Marcus responded calmly. My daughter was arrested without cause, searched without permission, and charged with crimes she didn't commit. If Officer Mitchell has a history of similar behavior, that's directly relevant to this case. The public has a right to know if the police department is protecting bad officers. The judge, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Henderson, looked skeptical. I'll review the request and issue a ruling next week. Marcus wasn't satisfied with just the criminal defense. He filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against Officer Mitchell and the police department. This was strategic. The civil case would have different rules about evidence and could expose things that the criminal prosecutors wanted to hide. While the legal battles played out in court, Marcus hired a private investigator named James Chen. James was a former police detective who now worked for lawyers. He knew how to find information that others might miss. I need you to canvass the neighborhood where Maya was stopped, Marcus told him. Find witnesses. Find anyone who saw anything. James went to work. He knocked on doors up and down Oakwood Avenue. Many people didn't want to get involved. Getting between a citizen and the police was uncomfortable. But James was persistent. On his third day of searching, James met Mrs. Linda Chen, an elderly woman who lived in a house on the corner. She wasn't related to James, but she invited him in for tea when she learned what he was investigating. I saw the whole thing from my window, Mrs. Chen said, sitting in her living room surrounded by photographs of her grandchildren. I was watering my plants when I noticed a girl in a car stop at the sign. She stopped completely. I remember because most people just roll through that sign, but she was very careful. James leaned forward. Are you sure it was the same girl? Maya Johnson? Oh, yes. I saw the police officer pull her over a few blocks down. I watched because it seemed strange. The girl hadn't done anything wrong. I almost called someone, but I didn't know who to call. Mrs. Chen looked sad. I should have done something. You're doing something now, James assured her. Would you be willing to testify to what you saw? Mrs. Chen nodded firmly. Yes, that officer was wrong. That poor girl was so polite and scared. It wasn't right. James found another witness too. A college student named Deshaun Harris who lived 3 houses down from where Maya was stopped. Deshaun had been coming home from work when he saw the flashing lights. He pulled out his phone and started recording. The cop saw me filming and told me to leave, Deshaun explained when James interviewed him. He was pretty aggressive about it, so I left. But I got about 2 minutes of footage before that. Can I see it? James asked. Deshaun pulled up the video on his phone. Even though it was taken from a distance, it clearly showed Officer Mitchell searching Maya's car and throwing her belongings onto the street. It showed Maya standing with her hands up, clearly not resisting. And it caught the moment when Mitchell grabbed her and slammed her against the car. "This is excellent," James said. "I need you to send this to me right away and save it in multiple places. Don't delete it." The third piece of evidence was the most important. James was walking back to his car when he noticed something. One of the houses directly across from where Maya had been stopped had a video doorbell. Those doorbells recorded constantly. James knocked on the door. A young couple answered, both looking curious. "Hi, I'm investigating a traffic stop that happened on this street about 2 weeks ago," James explained. "I noticed you have a video doorbell. Would you still have footage from that day?" The husband, whose name was Tom, nodded. "Those recordings saved to the cloud. We can check." They invited James inside and pulled up their doorbell app. Tom scrolled back to the date and time of Maya's arrest. And there it was. The entire stop recorded in clear video with audio. James watched the footage 3 times to make sure of what he was seeing. It was perfect. Better than perfect. It showed Maya stopping completely at the stop sign. It showed Officer Mitchell following her car for several blocks before turning on his lights. It showed the entire interaction, including Mitchell's hostile questions, his illegal search, and Maya's polite cooperation. Most importantly, the audio was clear. Every word could be heard. "This is exactly what I need," James told Tom and his wife. "This footage could be the key to helping a young girl who was falsely arrested." Tom and his wife looked at each other and nodded. "We want to help. We'll save this footage and send you a copy." That officer was out of line. James rushed back to Marcus's office with all 3 pieces of evidence. Marcus, Sarah, and Maya watched the doorbell camera footage together in Marcus's conference room. Maya cried as she watched herself on the screen. Seeing it from outside was different than remembering it. She could see how young and scared she looked. She could see how aggressive Mitchell was from the very beginning. She could hear his contemptuous tone and her own polite, frightened responses. "Baby, this is good," Sarah said, squeezing Maya's hand. "This proves everything you told us." Marcus was quiet, but his eyes were fierce. He had watched the footage 5 times already, noting every detail. This wasn't just evidence. This was proof of a civil rights violation, illegal search and seizure, false arrest, and assault. "We have him," Marcus said quietly. "Mitchell lied in his report. He said Maya ran the stop sign. She didn't. He said she was aggressive. She wasn't. He said he smelled marijuana. There was no marijuana. He said his cameras malfunctioned. But this doorbell camera shows the truth." Marcus filed an emergency motion for a hearing. He attached still images from the doorbell camera to his motion, showing Maya stopped at the sign and showing Mitchell's aggressive behavior. He included written statements from Mrs. Chen and Deshaun Harris. He argued that all charges against Maya should be dismissed immediately. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. The prosecutor tried to delay it, but Judge Henderson denied their request. She had seen the images Marcus included, and she wanted to see the full video. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was packed. News reporters had gotten wind of the story. Community activists showed up to support Maya. Some of Maya's teachers and classmates came too, finally believing her side of the story. Officer Mitchell sat at the front of the courtroom with his union lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Robert Kane. Mitchell looked angry, his jaw set and his eyes hard. He stared at Marcus with obvious hostility. "Your Honor," Marcus began when it was his turn to speak, "I'd like to show you footage of my daughter's arrest. This video was recorded by a doorbell camera across the street. It shows the entire incident from start to finish." The prosecutor, a young assistant DA named Kevin Walsh, stood up. "Your Honor, we weren't provided with this evidence in advance. This is ambush tactics." Marcus turned to face him. "Mr. Walsh, I received this evidence 3 days ago and immediately notified your office. You've had time to review it. If you haven't, that's not my problem." Judge Henderson, a serious black woman in her 50s, gestured to proceed. "Play the video, Mr. Johnson." The courtroom fell silent as the video played on a large screen. Everyone watched Maya stop completely at the sign. They watched Mitchell follow her. They heard him ask inappropriate questions about where she lived and whether the car was really hers. They watched him search her car without cause. They heard Maya being polite and cooperative, and they heard Mitchell's muttered words. "You people always think you're above the law." When the video ended, Judge Henderson sat back in her chair. Her expression was hard to read, but her eyes were angry. "Mr. Walsh," she said, "does the state wish to proceed with charges against Miss Johnson?" Walsh looked uncomfortable. He glanced at Mitchell, then at his boss, who was sitting in the back of the courtroom looking pale. "Your Honor, in light of new evidence, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Maya Johnson." "Motion granted," Judge Henderson said immediately. Then she looked at Mitchell. "Officer Mitchell, I'm filing a formal complaint against you with the police department. What I saw in that video was not police work. It was harassment and abuse of power." Mitchell's face turned red, but he said nothing. "Miss Johnson," Judge Henderson said, looking at Maya, "you're free to go. All charges are dismissed, and I'm sorry for what happened to you. You deserved better." Maya felt tears running down her face, but this time they were tears of relief. Her mother hugged her tight. Around them, people in the courtroom clapped, but Marcus didn't celebrate. His expression remained serious. He walked over to where Mitchell and his lawyer stood. "This isn't over," Marcus said quietly. "The criminal charges are dismissed, but I still have a federal civil rights lawsuit against you and the department. That's just beginning. By the time I'm done, everyone will know what kind of officer you are." Mitchell's jaw tightened. "You threatening me?" "No," Marcus replied. "I'm promising you. You hurt my daughter. You violated her rights, and you're going to answer for it." As they left the courthouse, reporters surrounded them asking questions. Marcus stopped to make a brief statement. "My daughter was targeted because of the color of her skin. She was arrested without cause, charged with crimes she didn't commit, and treated like a criminal when she had done nothing wrong. We have proof now that Officer Mitchell lied in his report. But this isn't just about one bad officer. It's about a system that protects bad officers instead of stopping them. We will continue fighting until that system changes." Maya stood beside her father, trying to be brave for the cameras. The criminal case was over, but she knew, as her father had said, that this was just the beginning. The civil rights lawsuit moved forward like a slow but powerful wave. Marcus knew that winning the criminal case was just the first step. Now he needed to prove that Officer Mitchell and the police department had violated Maya's constitutional rights. More importantly, he needed to show that this wasn't an isolated incident but part of a pattern. The city's lawyers fought hard to keep Officer Mitchell's personnel file sealed. They argued in court that it was private information, protected by law. They said that other complaints against Mitchell weren't relevant to Maya's case. Marcus stood before federal judge Thomas Bryant, a stern man in his 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes. "Your Honor, the city wants to hide Officer Mitchell's history, but if he has targeted other people of color, if he has a pattern of false arrests and excessive force, that goes directly to the heart of this case. The jury has a right to know if my daughter was the victim of one man's racism or part of a bigger problem." Judge Bryant thought for a long moment, then nodded. "I agree, Mr. Johnson. The city will produce Officer Mitchell's complete personnel file, including all complaints filed against him for the past 10 years. Any settlements the city has paid related to Officer Mitchell must also be disclosed." The city's lead attorney, a woman named Jennifer Ross, looked like she had been slapped. "Your Honor, this opens up privileged—" "My ruling stands," Judge Bryant interrupted. "You have 2 weeks to produce the documents." When the documents arrived at Marcus's office, they came in 3 large boxes. Marcus, his legal team, and James the investigator spent days going through everything. What they found was worse than Marcus had imagined. Officer Derek Mitchell had been involved in 17 incidents involving people of color over his 6 years on the force. 17. Some were traffic stops like Maya's. Others were arrests for minor offenses. In almost every case, Mitchell's reports painted the civilians as aggressive, uncooperative, or suspicious. But the complaints told a different story. A black businessman had complained that Mitchell pulled him over for no reason and searched his expensive car, asking repeatedly where he got the money to afford it. A Hispanic teenager had complained that Mitchell used excessive force during an arrest for skateboarding in a park. A black mother had complained that Mitchell stopped her and her children while they were walking home from church, demanding to know where they lived and what they were doing in the neighborhood. Every single complaint had been marked unsubstantiated or unfounded. Every single one. Mitchell had never faced any discipline. Marcus found something else too. The police department had quietly settled 4 lawsuits involving Mitchell. 4 families had sued. claiming false arrest, excessive force, or civil rights violations. The city had paid them a total of $320,000 to make the cases go away. And every settlement included a confidentiality agreement that prevented the families from talking about what happened. They knew, Marcus said to his team as they reviewed the documents. The department knew Mitchell was a problem, but they protected him anyway. Marcus also found internal emails between police supervisors. In one email chain, a lieutenant recommended that Mitchell be fired after his third excessive force complaint. But a captain responded that Mitchell was being unfairly targeted and that the complaints were just political correctness run amok. In another email, a sergeant mentioned that Mitchell had made racist comments in the locker room. But the sergeant was told by his supervisor to toughen up and that guys talk tough sometimes and it didn't mean anything. The most damning evidence came from the police department's own technical specialist, a man named David Torres. James the investigator had tracked him down and convinced him to talk. David sat in Marcus's conference room, nervous but determined. "I check and maintain all the body cameras and dash cams," he explained. "On the day Officer Mitchell arrested your daughter, I ran a diagnostic check on his equipment. Everything was working perfectly." Marcus leaned forward. "So when the department said there was a malfunction, they lied," David said flatly. "Mitchell turned off his cameras manually. I saw it in the system logs. When an officer turns off their camera, it creates a record. Mitchell did it before he pulled your daughter over. Did you report this?" Marcus asked. David nodded. "I told my supervisor the same day. I said we needed to investigate why Mitchell disabled his cameras. My supervisor told me to let it go and not make waves. He said Mitchell was going through a divorce and having a tough time and we should cut him some slack. Would you testify to this in court?" Marcus asked. "Yes," David said. "I've been feeling guilty about staying quiet. That girl could have been my daughter. I should have pushed harder." Marcus now had everything he needed for depositions. In a deposition, lawyers could question witnesses under oath before the trial. Whatever they said would be on the record and could be used in court. First, Marcus deposed Officer Mitchell himself. Mitchell arrived with his lawyer, Robert Kane, and his police union representative. He looked calm and confident, like he had nothing to worry about. Marcus started with simple questions. Where was Mitchell on the day in question? What time did he start his shift? What route was he patrolling? Then Marcus showed Mitchell the doorbell camera footage. "Officer Mitchell, this video shows my daughter stopping completely at the stop sign. Why did you write in your report that she ran the sign?" Mitchell shrugged. "The angle must have been different from where I was. From my position, it looked like she rolled through." "You were directly behind her," Marcus pointed out. "The same angle as this camera." "I know what I saw," Mitchell insisted. Marcus played another part of the video. "Here, you're searching my daughter's car. What probable cause did you have for that search?" "I smelled marijuana," Mitchell said. "The lab tested the mint tin you confiscated. No drugs were found, not even residue. How do you explain that?" "Maybe I was wrong about the smell," Mitchell admitted. "But I had reasonable suspicion at the time." Marcus changed direction. "How many times have you been complained about for racial profiling?" Mitchell's lawyer jumped in. "That's not relevant to—" "It's directly relevant," Marcus cut him off. "Answer the question, Officer Mitchell." "I don't know. A few times, maybe." 7 times, Marcus corrected. 7 complaints in 6 years. And 3 complaints for excessive force, 2 involving black teenagers. That's quite a pattern. "Those complaints were all investigated and found to be without merit," Mitchell said defensively. "Or they were swept under the rug by supervisors who didn't want to admit they had a racist cop on their force." Marcus replied. Mitchell's face turned red. "I'm not racist. I treat everyone the same." Marcus pulled out a transcript. "According to Officer Jessica Torres, you frequently make racist jokes in the locker room. She says you once said you enjoyed putting uppity ones in their place. Do you remember saying that?" Mitchell's jaw clenched. "No, Torres has an agenda against me." "What agenda would that be?" "She's one of these new diversity hires. She's too sensitive." "I see," Marcus said, making a note. "Let's talk about your body camera. Why wasn't it recording during my daughter's arrest?" "Technical malfunction," Mitchell said quickly. "Really?" Marcus pulled out David Torres' statement. "Because the technical specialist says your cameras were working perfectly. In fact, he says you manually disabled them before the stop." "Why did you do that?" Mitchell looked at his lawyer, who whispered something to him. "I want to invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination." "That's fine," Marcus said calmly. "The jury will hear that you refuse to answer." Marcus also deposed several other officers who worked with Mitchell. 2 officers, both white men who had been on the force for over a decade, defended Mitchell. They said he was a good cop who was being unfairly targeted. But a younger officer, Jessica Torres, told a different story. She was a Latina woman in her late 20s who had joined the force 3 years ago. She sat straight in her chair, looking nervous but determined. "Officer Mitchell has made me uncomfortable since my first day," Jessica testified. "He makes jokes about minorities. He calls civil rights activists troublemakers. And he's said multiple times that some neighborhoods need aggressive policing to keep people in line." "Did you report this behavior?" Marcus asked. "Yes, I reported it to Sergeant Williams. He told me that I needed to develop thicker skin if I wanted to make it in law enforcement. He said the locker room wasn't a college campus and guys talked rough. How did that make you feel?" Jessica's voice shook slightly. "Like I didn't belong. Like the department cared more about protecting bad officers than about doing what's right." Marcus also deposed 3 people who had sued the city over Mitchell's behavior. Because of the settlement agreements, they hadn't been allowed to talk publicly. But in a deposition, those agreements didn't apply. A man named Jerome Washington testified about being pulled over by Mitchell 3 years ago. "He asked me where I stole the car from. I showed him my registration proving it was my car, but he still searched it. He found nothing, but he gave me tickets for a broken taillight that wasn't broken and for an expired registration that wasn't expired. I had to take a day off work to fight the tickets in court." A woman named Maria Garcia testified about Mitchell grabbing her son during an arrest for a noise complaint. "My son was 17. He was having a birthday party and someone complained about the music. Officer Mitchell showed up and immediately became aggressive. When my son tried to show him ID, Mitchell grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against the wall. My son wasn't resisting. He was just scared." By the time all the depositions were finished, Marcus had built a devastating picture. Officer Mitchell wasn't just one bad cop making mistakes. He was a racist officer who had been targeting people of color for years. And the police department, instead of stopping him, had protected him at every turn. Marcus compiled all the evidence into a thick binder. He had witness statements, video footage, internal emails, settlement records, and testimony from other officers. He had proof that Mitchell had lied in his reports and disabled his cameras to hide his behavior. One evening, Marcus sat in his home office reviewing everything one more time. Maya came in and sat across from him. "Dad, do you think we'll win?" she asked quietly. Marcus looked at his daughter. She seemed older now, more serious. The arrest had changed her, made her grow up faster than she should have had to. "Yes," Marcus said firmly. "We're going to win. But more than that, we're going to make sure Officer Mitchell can never do this to anyone else. And we're going to force the police department to change how they handle bad officers." Maya nodded, then asked, "How many other people did Mitchell hurt before me?" "Too many," Marcus replied honestly. "But you're going to be the last one." That's what this case is about. It's about justice for you, but it's also about justice for everyone he hurt and everyone he might have hurt in the future. "No pressure," Maya said with a small, sad smile. Marcus reached across the desk and took her hand. "You don't have to carry this alone, baby. That's what I'm here for. You just have to keep being strong and telling your truth." As Maya left the office, Marcus looked at the binder of evidence again. The trial was scheduled to start in 2 weeks. He had everything he needed to win, but he knew the city would fight hard. They had a lot to lose if the truth came out about how they had protected Mitchell and ignored complaints for years. This was going to be a battle. But Marcus was ready. He had the truth on his side, and that was the most powerful weapon of all. The morning of the trial, Maya stood in front of her bedroom mirror trying to steady her shaking hands. She wore a simple blue dress that her mother had bought for the occasion. She looked older than 17, more serious. The girl who had driven home from basketball practice that evening seemed like a different person now. "You ready, baby?" Sarah appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a professional suit. Maya took a deep breath. "I don't know if I can do this, Mom. What if the jury doesn't believe me?" Sarah walked over and put her hands on Maya's shoulders. "They will believe you, because you're going to tell the truth, and the truth is powerful. Your father has made sure of that. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and cameras. Civil rights organizations had organized a rally in support of Maya. People held signs that said "Justice for Maya" and "End police racism." Maya felt overwhelmed by all the attention. Marcus guided his family through the crowd, his hand protective on Maya's shoulder. Inside the courthouse, they went through security and walked to the courtroom. It was larger than the one where the criminal charges had been dismissed. This was federal court, more formal and intimidating. The jury had been selected the week before. 8 women and 4 men, a mix of different races and backgrounds. Marcus had worked carefully during jury selection to find people who would listen with open minds. Judge Thomas Bryant entered, and everyone stood. He was known as a fair judge who didn't tolerate nonsense from either side. "We'll begin with opening statements," Judge Bryant announced. "Mr. Johnson, you may proceed." Marcus stood and walked to face the jury. He didn't hold any notes. He spoke from his heart. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about a 17-year-old girl who did everything right and was still treated like a criminal. Maya Johnson is an honor student, a varsity basketball player, and a young woman with a bright future. On the evening in question, she drove carefully, followed every traffic law, and when she was pulled over for no reason, she was polite and respectful." Marcus paused, letting his words sink in. But none of that mattered to Officer Derek Mitchell. It didn't matter that Maya stopped at the stop sign. It didn't matter that she was cooperative. It didn't matter that she had done nothing wrong. What mattered to Officer Mitchell was the color of her skin. He saw a young black girl driving a nice car in a good neighborhood, and he decided she didn't belong there. Some members of the jury nodded slightly. Marcus continued. "Over the next several days, you will see video evidence of what really happened. You will hear from witnesses. You will learn about Officer Mitchell's long history of targeting people of color, and you will see how the police department protected him time and time again, even though they knew he was violating people's rights." Marcus's voice grew stronger. "This case is about more than one traffic stop. It's about a system that allows racist officers to operate without consequences. It's about a department that values protecting its own over protecting the citizens it serves. And it's about my daughter who deserves justice." When Marcus sat down, the city's lead attorney, Jennifer Ross, stood for her opening statement. She was a skilled lawyer, and Marcus knew she would try to make Mitchell seem reasonable. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ross began, "Officer Mitchell was doing his job that evening. He observed what he believed to be a traffic violation and conducted a traffic stop. Things escalated, but that's not unusual in police work. Split-second decisions have to be made. Officer Mitchell acted within his training and authority. Ross tried to paint Maya as privileged. The Johnsons are a wealthy family. Mr. Johnson is a prominent lawyer. They live in an expensive neighborhood. When their daughter was arrested, they had the resources to hire investigators and file lawsuits. But that doesn't mean Officer Mitchell did anything wrong. The plaintiff wants you to believe this is about racism," Ross continued. "But Officer Mitchell has served this city for 6 years. He's made hundreds of traffic stops involving people of all races. This is one incident being blown out of proportion by a family with the means to do so." Marcus remained calm during Ross's statement, but he knew her strategy. She was trying to make the jury resent his family's success, to suggest they were using their privilege to attack a hard-working officer. It was a risky approach, and Marcus was confident it wouldn't work. The trial began with Marcus calling his witnesses. First was Mrs. Linda Chen, the elderly woman who had seen everything from her window. "I saw the girl stop at the sign," Mrs. Chen testified clearly. "She stopped completely. Then a few blocks later, the police car pulled her over. I watched because it seemed strange. She hadn't done anything wrong." Ross tried to shake Mrs. Chen's testimony during cross-examination. "Isn't it possible you were mistaken? That from your angle you couldn't see clearly?" "No," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "I have good eyes. I know what I saw." That girl stopped. Next, Marcus called Deshaun Harris, the college student who had recorded part of the arrest on his phone. The video was played for the jury. It showed Officer Mitchell's aggressive behavior and Maya's compliance. "The officer told me to leave," Deshaun testified. "He seemed angry that I was filming. But citizens have the right to record police in public. I left because I was scared of what he might do." The most powerful evidence came when Marcus played the full doorbell camera footage for the jury. The courtroom was silent as everyone watched. The video showed everything. Maya stopping at the sign, Mitchell following her. His hostile questions, the illegal search, Maya reaching for her ringing phone and Mitchell slamming her against the car. Several jurors looked upset as they watched. One woman shook her head. When the audio picked up Mitchell's muttered words, "You people always think you're above the law," Maya saw a black man on the jury close his eyes and take a deep breath. Marcus called expert witnesses too. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, a professor who studied racial profiling, testified about the psychological tactics officers sometimes use to intimidate people of color. When Officer Mitchell asked Maya where she really lived and whether the car was really hers, those questions had nothing to do with the alleged traffic violation, Dr. Rodriguez explained. They were designed to make her feel like she didn't belong in that neighborhood, like she was suspicious simply for being there. Another expert, a former police chief named Raymond Lewis, testified about proper police procedures. Officer Mitchell violated multiple protocols, Chief Lewis stated. He had no probable cause for the search. He escalated the situation unnecessarily, and most seriously, he disabled his body camera, which is a clear violation of department policy designed to cover up his actions. Then Marcus called David Torres, the technical specialist who maintained the police cameras. Officer Mitchell's cameras were working perfectly that day, David testified. He turned them off manually before pulling Ms. Johnson over. When I reported this to my supervisor, I was told to forget about it. Ross tried to discredit David during cross-examination. "Isn't it true you were recently passed over for a promotion?" "Yes," David admitted. "So you have a reason to be angry at the department?" "I'm not angry," David said calmly. "I'm here because what happened to that girl was wrong, and the department tried to cover it up." Someone needed to tell the truth. Officer Jessica Torres was called next. She looked nervous but spoke clearly about Mitchell's pattern of racist behavior. "He made jokes about minorities regularly," Jessica testified. "He said things like, 'These people need to learn their place.' When I reported it, I was told I was being too sensitive." Ross tried to paint Jessica as someone with an agenda. "Haven't you filed a discrimination complaint against the department yourself?" "Yes," Jessica said. "Because I was retaliated against for speaking up about Officer Mitchell's behavior." That's exactly the problem. Good officers who try to do the right thing get punished while bad officers get protected. Finally, it was Maya's turn to testify. This was the moment Marcus had prepared her for, but he knew it would be hard. Maya walked to the witness stand with her head held high, trying to be brave. Marcus questioned her gently, walking her through every detail of that evening. Maya's voice shook as she described her fear, especially the moment when Mitchell slammed her against the car. "I thought he was going to hurt me," Maya said, tears running down her face. "I was so scared. I kept asking what I did wrong, but he wouldn't answer. He just kept being aggressive like I was a criminal." "How has this experience affected you?" Marcus asked. Maya took a shaky breath. "I have nightmares. I jump when I hear sirens. I was suspended from my basketball team, and some people at school think I'm a drug user even though I've never touched drugs. I feel like no matter what I accomplish, no matter how good I am, it doesn't matter because of my skin color." Ross's cross-examination was sharp. "Isn't it true your phone rang and you reached into your pocket?" "Yes," Maya admitted. "It was a reflex. I was going to silence it. But Officer Mitchell didn't know that. He saw you reach toward your pocket. Couldn't that be seen as a threatening movement?" "My hands were visible the whole time," Maya said. "I wasn't threatening anyone. I was scared and confused." Ross pressed harder. "Your father is a civil rights lawyer. Have you discussed this case with him extensively?" "Of course," Maya said. "He's my father and my lawyer. So he's coached you on what to say?" Marcus stood up. "Objection. That's not a proper question." "Sustained," Judge Bryant agreed. But Ross had made her point. She was suggesting that Maya's testimony had been rehearsed and influenced by her father. The city called Officer Mitchell to testify in his own defense. He sat in the witness box looking confident, almost defiant. "I pulled Ms. Johnson over because I observed a traffic violation," Mitchell testified. "When I approached her vehicle, her behavior seemed nervous and suspicious." "What made her behavior suspicious?" Ross asked. "She was gripping the steering wheel tightly. Her breathing was fast. In my experience, that can indicate someone is hiding something. Or it could indicate someone who's scared because they've been pulled over by a cop." Marcus said quietly but loud enough for the jury to hear. "Mr. Johnson," Judge Bryant warned, but his tone suggested he agreed. Under cross-examination, Marcus dismantled Mitchell's testimony piece by piece. "Officer Mitchell, you wrote in your report that Maya ran the stop sign. But we have video showing she stopped completely. Were you lying in your report?" "I reported what I observed," Mitchell said stubbornly. "You also wrote that you smelled marijuana. But no marijuana was found. Were you lying about that too?" "I believed I smelled something suspicious." Marcus pulled out Mitchell's deposition transcript. "In your deposition, you said you disabled your body camera because of a technical malfunction, but we have testimony from the technical specialist that you turned it off manually. Which is it?" Mitchell's face reddened. "I may have been mistaken about the malfunction. Or you turned it off deliberately because you knew what you were about to do was wrong," Marcus suggested. "That's not true," Mitchell insisted. Marcus showed the jury a chart listing all 17 incidents involving Mitchell and people of color. "In 6 years, you've been complained about 7 times for racial profiling, 3 times for excessive force. The city has settled 4 lawsuits because of your behavior. And yet you claim you're not racist and this was just a routine traffic stop?" "Those complaints were investigated and found to be without merit," Mitchell said. "Or they were buried by a department that didn't want to admit it had a problem," Marcus countered. The trial lasted 6 days. Both sides gave their closing arguments. Ross tried one last time to paint Mitchell as a dedicated officer making tough decisions. Marcus reminded the jury of the evidence, the video, the witnesses, and Mitchell's history. "This isn't about one traffic stop," Marcus said in his closing. "It's about a pattern of racism that was allowed to continue because no one was willing to stop it. My daughter is brave enough to stand up and say what happened. The question is, are you brave enough to hold Officer Mitchell and the police department accountable?" The jury deliberated for 7 hours. Maya sat in the hallway with her parents, holding their hands, waiting. It felt like the longest 7 hours of her life. Finally, the bailiff came out. "The jury has reached a verdict." Everyone filed back into the courtroom. The jury foreman, a middle-aged white man who worked as an engineer, stood to read the verdict. "In the matter of Maya Johnson versus Derek Mitchell and the city police department, we the jury find in favor of the plaintiff on all counts." Maya felt her mother squeeze her hand tight. Tears ran down Sarah's face. Marcus remained composed, but Maya could see the relief in his eyes. The foreman continued reading the damages award. $4.2 million. The amount was stunning. Officer Mitchell sat stone-faced at the defense table, but Maya saw his hands clenched into fists. Judge Bryant thanked the jury and dismissed them. As people filed out of the courtroom, reporters rushed to get statements, but Marcus just held his daughter, letting her cry against his shoulder. "It's over, baby," he whispered. "You did it. We did it." But both of them knew that while this battle was won, the fight for real change was just beginning. The verdict sent shockwaves through the city. $4.2 million was one of the largest civil rights awards in the state's history. The news spread quickly, making national headlines. Maya's story was suddenly everywhere, on television, in newspapers, and all over social media. The morning after the verdict, Marcus received a call from the police chief's office. The chief himself wanted to meet. Marcus agreed, bringing his legal team with him. They met in a conference room at City Hall, where the chief, the mayor, and several city council members waited with serious expressions. Police Chief Ronald Davis was a black man in his 50s who had been chief for only 2 years. He looked tired and frustrated as he began speaking. "Mr. Johnson, I want to start by apologizing to your daughter for what happened to her. What Officer Mitchell did was wrong, and the department's handling of complaints against him was unacceptable. Apologies don't change the system that protected Mitchell for 6 years," Marcus replied calmly. "Your department received complaint after complaint about that man, and every single one was dismissed or buried." The mayor, a white woman named Susan Bennett, leaned forward. "We understand your anger, Mr. Johnson. The verdict made it clear that changes need to be made. We want to work with you to implement reforms." Marcus had expected this. Cities facing massive lawsuit awards often became suddenly interested in reform. "What kind of reforms are you proposing?" Chief Davis pulled out a folder. "We're prepared to implement mandatory body cameras for all officers, with severe penalties for tampering. We'll create an independent civilian review board to investigate misconduct complaints. and will require all officers to complete training on implicit bias and community relations. That's a start, Marcus said, but it's not enough. I want the early warning system for problem officers completely overhauled. Right now, officers can have multiple complaints with no consequences. That needs to change. I also want transparency. When officers are disciplined or fired, the public should know why. The mayor looked uncomfortable. That could violate privacy laws. Then change the laws, Marcus said firmly. The police union's contract protects bad officers. That contract needs to be renegotiated with community input. This sparked a heated discussion. The city officials worried about pushback from the police union, which was powerful and politically connected. But Marcus stood his ground. The jury just awarded my daughter over $4 million because your department violated her constitutional rights. How many more lawsuits can this city afford? How many more families need to be hurt before real changes happen? After 3 hours of negotiation, they reached an agreement. The city would implement the reforms Marcus demanded. In exchange, Marcus agreed to lead a citizens' commission on police reform and to work with the department rather than against it. But there was one more thing Marcus insisted on. Officer Derek Mitchell must be fired immediately. Not suspended, not reassigned, fired. And I want his case referred to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Chief Davis nodded slowly. I can make that happen. 2 days later, Officer Derek Mitchell was officially terminated from the police department. The police union immediately announced they would fight the firing, but the video evidence and jury verdict made their position weak. Mitchell held a press conference claiming he was a victim of political correctness and that his career had been destroyed by false accusations. Maya watched the press conference at home with her parents. When Mitchell claimed he had done nothing wrong, Maya felt anger rise in her chest. He still doesn't get it, she said. He still doesn't understand what he did to me. People like Mitchell never do, Marcus replied. They don't see us as fully human. That's why the system needs to change. The district attorney's office opened an investigation into Mitchell's past arrests. Over the next several weeks, they reviewed dozens of cases where Mitchell had been the arresting officer. What they found was disturbing. In 12 cases, there was evidence that Mitchell had filed false reports or tampered with evidence. 3 people were released from jail when their convictions were vacated. One was a young black man named Terrence Williams, who had served 18 months for a drug possession charge based solely on Mitchell's testimony. When investigators reviewed the case, they found Mitchell's report contradicted the physical evidence. Terrence had been innocent all along. Maya met Terrence at a community event a month after his release. He was 22 years old and had lost his job and apartment because of the false conviction. Thank you, Terrence said to Maya, his voice thick with emotion. If you hadn't fought back, I'd still be in there. Your courage freed me. Maya didn't feel courageous. She felt sad that Terrence had lost so much because of one man's racism. I'm sorry you went through that. Don't be sorry, Terrence said. Be proud. You stood up when a lot of people would have stayed quiet. You made them listen. That conversation changed something in Maya. She realized her case wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had been hurt by officers like Mitchell and systems that protected them. Maya started speaking at schools and community forums about her experience. She talked about knowing your rights during police encounters. She encouraged young people to report misconduct and to never stop fighting for justice. Her story resonated with teenagers who had similar experiences but didn't know how to fight back. The Police Reform Commission that Marcus led began its work. It included community activists, civil rights lawyers, former police officers, and citizens from different neighborhoods. They held public hearings where people could share their experiences with police. The stories that came out were heartbreaking. A grandmother talked about being handcuffed in front of her grandchildren during a wrongful arrest. A business owner described being harassed for years by officers who thought he didn't belong in the neighborhood where he worked. A teenage boy showed scars from being beaten during a stop and frisk. The commission worked for 6 months, meeting twice a week. They analyzed data on police stops, arrests, and use of force. The numbers revealed what many people already knew. Black and Hispanic residents were stopped and searched at much higher rates than white residents, even though they were no more likely to be found with contraband. The Commission's final report contained 43 recommendations for reform. Some were implemented immediately, like the body camera requirements and the Civilian Review Board. Others would take years to accomplish, like changing the police union contract and restructuring how officers were trained and promoted. Marcus knew this was just the beginning. Real change was slow and required constant pressure, but for the first time in years he felt hopeful. Maya's life slowly began to return to normal, though she knew she would never be the same person she was before that traffic stop. She was invited back to the basketball team after the verdict, and she helped lead her team to the regional championships. She was accepted to several excellent colleges, ultimately choosing to study criminal justice with plans to become a civil rights lawyer like her father. The suspension and arrest were expunged from her record, but Maya knew she would carry the emotional scars for a long time. She still sometimes had nightmares about that evening. She still felt her heart race when she saw police cars, but she was healing, slowly but surely. One evening, about a year after the trial, Maya sat with her father in his home office. They were working on materials for a Know Your Rights presentation Maya would give at a local high school. "Dad, do you think anything really changed?" Maya asked. "Or did we just win one case?" Marcus thought carefully before answering. "We changed more than you know. Officer Mitchell can't hurt anyone else. 3 innocent people are free because your case exposed his lies. The police department has new policies and oversight. Other cities are looking at what we did and implementing similar reforms." "But there are still bad cops out there," Maya said. "Yes," Marcus admitted. "There are, and there always will be. Just like there are bad people in every profession. But now there's a blueprint for holding them accountable. Your case showed other families that they can fight back. You gave people hope that justice is possible." Maya smiled slightly. "No pressure, right?" Marcus laughed. "You don't carry this burden alone, baby. You started something, but it's bigger than you now. All these people working for reform, all these families speaking up. They're part of it too. Change happens when enough people say no more." Sarah came into the office carrying hot chocolate for both of them. "You two need a break. You've been working for hours." They took their mugs out to the back porch and sat together looking at the stars. Maya thought about that scared 17-year-old girl who had been handcuffed and arrested for no reason. She thought about all the people who had faced similar injustice, but didn't have a lawyer father to fight for them. She thought about the long road ahead. "I'm going to help people like Terrence," Maya said suddenly. "People who can't afford good lawyers. People who don't know how to fight the system." "I know you will," Marcus said, putting his arm around his daughter. "You already are." The following week, Marcus and Maya launched a nonprofit organization called the Justice Defense Fund. Its mission was to provide free legal representation for families facing police misconduct cases. They raised money from the verdict settlement and donations from supporters who had followed Maya's case. Within months, they had helped file cases for 5 families, all involving officers with patterns of misconduct that had been ignored by their departments. Officer Derek Mitchell, meanwhile, faced criminal charges for perjury and evidence tampering. His trial was scheduled for the following year. He had lost his job, his reputation, and was facing the possibility of prison time. Some people felt sorry for him, saying his life was ruined. But Maya didn't feel sorry. She remembered the fear she felt that evening, and she thought about all the people he had hurt over the years. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability and making sure it didn't happen again. Maya also became an advocate for legislation at the state level. She testified before the state legislature in support of a bill that would create a statewide database of police misconduct complaints. The bill would make it harder for problem officers to simply move to different departments when they got in trouble. Standing at the podium in the state capitol, speaking to legislators and reporters, Maya felt powerful in a way she never had before. Her voice mattered. Her story mattered, and she was using both to create change. "I was 17 years old when Officer Mitchell targeted me because of my skin color," Maya testified. "I was scared, humiliated, and traumatized. But I was lucky. I had parents who could fight for me. Not everyone has that. The families you'll hear from today, they need this legislation because the current system has failed them over and over again." The bill passed with strong bipartisan support. It was called Maya's Law in her honor. When the governor signed it, Maya stood beside him for the ceremony. News cameras flashed as she posed with the signed bill. It was surreal to see her name on a piece of legislation that would affect police accountability across the entire state. That night, Maya's family celebrated with a quiet dinner at home. They invited Mrs. Chen, Deshawn, David Torres, and Officer Jessica Torres, the people whose courage to tell the truth had made justice possible. To Maya, Marcus raised his glass in a toast, who turned the worst experience of her life into a catalyst for change. To all of us, Maya corrected. None of this would have happened without everyone here. You all stood up when it mattered. As they ate and talked, Maya looked around the table at these people who had become part of her extended family. They came from different backgrounds and different lives, but they were united by a belief that justice was worth fighting for. Maya thought about the journey from that terrible evening to this moment. She thought about the fear, the anger, the tears, and the struggle. She thought about the courtroom testimony, the verdict, and all the work that had come after. It hadn't been easy. There were still days when the trauma hit her hard, but it had been worth it. Officer Mitchell had tried to make Maya feel powerless. He had tried to make her feel like she didn't matter, like her rights didn't matter. Instead, he had awakened something in her. A determination to fight, a refusal to stay silent, a commitment to making sure no other teenager would have to go through what she went through. Years later, when Maya graduated from law school and joined her father's firm, she would think back to this moment often. The scared 17-year-old girl had grown into a strong woman who fought for justice every day. She had taken her pain and transformed it into purpose. The racist cop who denied her justice had ultimately become the reason she dedicated her life to fighting for justice for others. Officer Mitchell had thought he was above the law, that he could continue his pattern of discrimination without consequences. But when he targeted Maya Johnson, he made a crucial mistake. He went after a girl whose lawyer father would never stop fighting, and whose courage would inspire others to stand up as well. In the end, justice prevailed. Not just in a courtroom, but in a movement that changed how a city, and eventually a state, held its police officers accountable. Maya's story became a reminder that one person's courage to fight back could create ripples that turned into waves of change. And it all started because a father refused to let his daughter's rights be violated without consequences, and a daughter refused to let fear silence her voice.